Happy Chinese New Year. We are going to start the second part of the program today. So if you wanted, you could stay seated at the tables, or if you'd like to come up front and find a seat right in front of me. So for those who don't know, the Walk of Wellesley did cater the luncheon today, so I hope you enjoyed it. And a big shout out to our volunteers this afternoon. They helped with transitioning the room from this morning's program, and they've been here setting up. So I also wanted to take a moment and acknowledge Damarie Cole, who is our custodian, for decorating the room with these beautiful decorations. And one of our participants, Betty Lee Wang, for lending us the decorations. They were from her friend who went to China and brought them back. So they're all authentic. Feel free to take photos if you'd like. So now we have our second part of the program. I'd like to introduce Roberta Hing. And she is going to give a presentation on Chinese customs, the new year, and she also did a bit of cooking. She brought some cookies, which she will give you out the recipes for. I think hopefully all of you had at least one to try. So a little bit about Roberta. Roberta grew up in Arizona in a family with 7 children, which comprised half the Chinese population of her town. Her parents were both born in China, and she learned to cook from her mother, who prepared elaborate Chinese meals for their family, which is central to the Chinese family culture. After graduating from Harvard with a degree in sociology, she worked in public service, but like her mother, Roberta prioritized the family meal and Chinese dishes for her family of 4 boys. She is now a personal chef and a cooking instructor, and Roberta and I have been speaking about setting up a cooking class or a series at the Recreation Department in May. So stay tuned for that newsletter, and please join me in welcoming Roberta.
You want me to use this? Gong Xi Fa Cai, Gong Hei Fat Chow. Now this is one of many common greetings for Chinese New Year's, and it means wishing you prosperity. And the first one, they mean the same thing, but the first one is in Mandarin, which is one of the primary dialects spoken in China, and the second one is Cantonese. Now they're written exactly the same, but they're spoken differently. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And as we go along, if you have questions, feel free. Louder. Louder. Okay. Anytime I'm not louder, just raise your hand. As we go along, if you have questions, feel free to ask, because I know I can't remember my questions at the end of a talk. So if you want to interrupt me, it's fine. So welcome to the Year of the Dog. Today starts the new year. You all have a Chinese Zodiac chart with you. Do you in the back, everyone who's not?
I'll pass them out for the people on front.
Okay. Do you want me to pass a few of these out?
No, that's okay.
Are you sure? Okay. So the Chinese Zodiac is based on a 12-year cycle, and each year is represented by an animal. So if you want to find the year you were born to determine the sign, and you can find your little zodiac animal, and I don't know if there's enough light to read what your little description is. So since we're the Year of the Dog, is there anyone who is the Year of the Dog? If you find your year, do you need lights on to see it? No? Let's see if I hand out. Here you go. Here you go. Sure. Oh, we have a dog. Okay. So you are, now I can't read. You are generous and work well with others. The dog is a faithful and honest friend. Guard against a sharp tongue. Okay, so that's you. Does that describe you well? Well, we won't go and pick everyone, but do we have anyone who might be the year of the dragon. Dragon. I'm a dragon. Full of vitality and enthusiasm, the dragon is a popular individual. Guard against being bossy and loud. I think my siblings would say that characterized me very well. So these are fun to look at and find your zodiac animal. And sometimes you'll find you're the same animal as a grandchild or a son or daughter. Now, historically, China has been an agricultural country with harvesting and planting as important times of the year. And Chinese New Year's is a way to celebrate the beginning of a new planting season. Now, the Chinese have very strong beliefs in symbols that are part of traditions of Chinese New Year's. And we're often thought to be superstitious in that respect. Now, preparations for the new year involve a thorough cleaning of your house and hanging red decorations. The red decorations symbolize happiness. Often the Chinese word for luck might also be hung in the house as a decoration. And people will get new haircuts, buy new clothes, all following the theme of out with the old and in with the new. Oranges and tangerines might be placed in bowls around the house to symbolize luck and wealth. And on New Year's Eve, which was last night, all the families will gather with extended family and have a very big feast. Now, at this feast, we have special foods that are eaten that symbolize different things. For example, if they have pork, it symbolizes wealth. They might have duck, which symbolizes happiness. And when you serve the duck, you know, it's not the duck you would get in a restaurant that's just the duck breast. It's often the whole duck cut up, but with the head, the neck. You know it's a duck, believe me. And then also fish and dumplings, which symbolize good fortune. And again, the fish is served whole with the head, the tail. You know it's a fish. There's no disguising it. And actually, one of my cousins always asks for the fish head. She says it's her favorite part. She likes the flesh behind the eyes. Sorry if I ruined a few of your appetites. And in Singapore, one of my cousins lives there, and he said it's very popular to have this raw salmon salad, which symbolizes prosperity. And last but not least, noodles, long noodles. The longer the noodles, the longer your life. And you should never cut the noodles lest you shorten your life. That's the theory. Now, the New Year's celebration usually lasts for at least a couple of weeks. And it's customary to visit family and friends. Especially on New Year's Day, you visit and honor your elders. And you have to bring gifts. You bring gifts of oranges and candy, and the candy symbolizes togetherness. And you bring envelopes of lucky money. We'll be handing these out at the end, these envelopes of lucky money. They're Hong Bao, which is the Mandarin, or Lai Si, which is Cantonese. And in the envelopes, the denominations of the money is always in even numbers. Again, even numbers are lucky, odd numbers are not so lucky. So another tradition that is very fun on the New Year's is the lion dance. And lion dances are performed throughout big cities in China, and you'll find them across Chinatown. You don't have to start it yet, but and it's performed to bring good luck and scare away evil spirits. The owners of restaurants and shops and bakeries will often, outside their door, they'll set some gifts for the lions. And they're usually oranges and cabbages. and the lions will come to the door, accept the food, and bow 3 times in gratitude. And then the pair of lions will eat the food. Next, the lions will take the cabbages and throw them to the ground with enough force to smash them, which symbolizes spreading good fortune among the crowd. Now we'll play a short video of this. It's in Hong Kong, and you can see the very beginning of what I just told you. So to give you a little background on my family, as Ashley mentioned, my parents were both born in China, but they did not meet until they were in college in the US. My father was born in the South, in the Guangdong province, and my mother was born in the North, in Beijing. So, they speak different dialects. My mother speaks Mandarin, my father speaks Cantonese. They can't understand each other in Chinese. So they had to speak English to each other to communicate. The disappointing part is I didn't learn Chinese. I only learned enough to know when my mother was yelling at me and I was in trouble. I knew that. I knew what she was saying. And then when she would be talking about us to her relatives on the phone, I would hear her going off, and then she would say one of the 7 kids' names. So we would listen and try to pick up what she was saying. So she actually taught my oldest sister Mandarin when she was a child, and then it became too hard after 7 kids. It's just an effort to keep it going. So my mother's family came to the US when she was 18 in 1949, just as the communists were coming and taking over China. They were on the last plane out of the country before they stopped allowing people to leave. My mother was in her first semester of college, and she did not want to leave China. Let me show you. Oh, you have the clicker. So this is a picture of my mom in 1934. She's the baby at 2 years old. And you can see the dress, the clothes they're wearing. That's the typical traditional dress at the time. This is in the winter time. So you can see that it looks like they're wearing coats, but that's what they're wearing. They didn't have a very good heat. And so it's all padded. And the men are wearing almost identical to what the women are wearing. And the next. And then this is my mother on the right, her parents, and her older sister. This was a few months before they left China. Now, my mother's family left China not just to escape communism. My grandfather, her father, was an educator, and he worked educating peasants, or coolies as they were called in China. He did this in all the rural areas in the country. Now, he started his work during World War I in France. In 1917, after he graduated from college in the US, the YMCA asked him if he would go to France and help out with the Chinese laborers that were there. Now, the Chinese laborers were there working on building roads, railroads, airfields, and they were to take the place of the Allied laborers who then they sent to the front line to work. So the Chinese were there. They signed up with the promise of daily food and wages. The problem is the laborers were miserable, and the foreign food made them sick. They were used to a diet of rice and vegetables, mainly rice and vegetables. That's what they ate. But in war times in France, they were given bully beef, which was tinned beef and beans. It didn't sit well with their systems. Also, they were given cold water to drink. Seems fine to us, but in China, they only drank hot water or hot tea. So it messed with their systems. But my grandfather noticed the worst of it all was they were homesick. Now, they couldn't obviously speak French or English, and they couldn't read or write. These were laborers. And so they kept asking my grandfather, they would go to him and ask him if he would write letters home for them. So he obliged. He wrote a few letters, word spread, a few more came, a few more. Soon there were 200 to 300 people, men outside his hut, waiting for him, lined up for him to write their letters. And in addition to writing the letters, when they would get letters back, they would find someone in the village to write the letters back to them. He had to read them too. And he started to wonder, where will this all end? So he made a decision. He called them all together in their encampment and he said, I am not going to write or read your letters anymore. I'm going to teach you how to read and write. The men broke out in laughter. Now, you see, for centuries, Chinese peasants were illiterate, and it was a revolutionary idea to want to teach them how to read and write. Because they were considered lower class, they were also considered too stupid to learn to read and write. That was the way it was. Reading and writing, the written language, was reserved for scholars in China. So now, the Chinese language is made up, it has no alphabet. So as you can see from your little charts of the Chinese language, they're characters. The characters represent a word or sometimes phrases. It's very elaborate, and it takes a lot of time to learn to write. Now, there are over 40,000 characters to learn. So my grandfather simplified it to about 600 essential characters that would be enough for them so they could write simple letters home and then also be able to read them, but read bulletins about postings about the war and the world at large that they would put up in their encampments. So he taught them that enough basic to get by. Now, after the war, he went back to China, and he started a mass education movement to start to educate the masses of peasants there. He traveled to the US to raise money for his work, and this was during World War II. In 1943, he was honored with the Copernican Award as one of 10 modern revolutionaries that brought great changes to human life. He was honored along with Orville Wright, Walt Disney, Henry Ford, John Dewey, and this gentleman you recognize as Albert Einstein. So this is the night they got their award in Carnegie Hall. Now, he was successful in his quest for raising money when he was in the US, and that Congress passed a China Aid Act in 1948 and set aside millions of dollars for his work. Now, notice the year, 1948. Okay, just to remember that. Now, the communist government made it known that they didn't like my grandfather's connection to the West, and educating peasants went against all that the communists were about. So he was not on the good side of the government. They had to leave, and had he stayed, he would have been jailed. So he left in 1949 and only got to use $4 million of those dollars to start the schools. So he continued his work after leaving China, but he based his operations in the Philippines. And his program spread to India, Central and South America, Africa, and other countries in Southeast Asia. And he expanded it beyond just education. He then went towards livelihood, teaching them farming methods, teaching them about health and self-government. So it was a fourfold project. He continued his work until he died in 1990 at the age of 96. And the institute that he started is called the International Institute of Rural Reconstruction, still based in the Philippines, and it still exists today. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about any of that, but yes?
You mentioned about the character writing in the Chinese language. A lot of Asian countries use character writing.
Very good question. So the Japanese, there are some characters that are very similar. So my mother can read some Japanese characters. Not all of them because they've been changed somewhat, but according to my mom, they were based on Chinese characters. So there are similarities. And in China, they have so many different dialects. Like I said, they can't understand each other. But if they wrote it down, they would be able to communicate.
How about Korean Hangul?
I don't know that. Good question. Any other questions? Yes. In spoken language? Only 100 symbols. Wow, that's amazing. In the Chinese, it's over 40,000 characters. They can't understand each other either. Yeah, so the intonations and then the way it's pronounced, it's all differently. They have now. Let me show you from the first slide. So the first slide, see how it's written there, the Gong Xi Fa Zai, that is the romanization of Chinese. And I can't remember the year that they started to do that, but it's actually, like you could see 3 or 4 different ways that that's written in English. In regular Roman letters, because it's just how it sounds. So it's sounding out kind of what the Chinese characters are. So they're completely different. Japanese would be completely different. Well, they're all. Yeah, they don't have capital, I don't think. And actually, in China, they don't have, their pronouns are all the same. My mother, when she speaks English, she often says him and her interchangeably because they don't, it's not him and her, it's just you. You know what I mean? Yes. Yes.
Now, in your example, there are 4 words in Mandarin, 4 words
They do. So I can't read Chinese, but I know this. This is the Gong Xi, so it's wishing you, and then this is prosperity. And actually, the literal translation is hoping you make a lot of money. It's the Chinese.
basically a symbol represents
Yes.
where you have several letters that make a word.
Exactly. And you can see in your Zodiac chart, so those symbols, for example, represent the whole, the animal. That's what those Chinese symbols are. Sometimes Chinese symbols also will look like visually what they are. There's a word for tree that looks like a tree, and then forest is multiples of those trees. And the horse, you can see it has 4 legs and a tail. So it's not all the words look like what they are, but that's, yes. It's just like I think in the United States, I think parents try to teach their children characters. And calligraphy, it's a class that they teach. They start it very young. So I guess it depends on the parents if they want to start teaching them before they start formal school. Any other questions? Now, as Ashley mentioned, we'll be offering some cooking classes this spring, and I'm looking forward to sharing some recipes with you. I want to just tell you about the cookies that I brought, the Chinese sesame cookies. They're found throughout China, and I had them there. I have never been able to find them here. I don't know why. And then the Chinese almond cookies are actual variations of a Chinese walnut cookie, which was created in the emperor's palace in the Ming dynasty in the 16th century. And they're considered a royalty cookie. So anyone has any questions about our cooking classes or anything else, feel free to ask. If you want to ask me individually afterwards, that's great too. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed talking to you.